This is the engine out of a 2019 Chevrolet Silverado 1500, the 5.3 liter L84 all aluminum V8. And for those of you that have watched this channel for quite some time, you know I've torn down tons and tons of 5.3 liter GM V8s. From every generation, every single variant I've torn down on the channel. So why would I pick another one for this week's teardown? Well, this is not the same as any of the engines I've torn down. The closest related one would be the previous generation, the L83, and this is one better. It's a terrible joke. I won't do that again. This is not the same as an L83. It doesn't have active fuel management. It doesn't have 4 cylinders that can turn on and turn off. It can go into 4-cylinder or V6 mode. You don't have to deal with 4 cylinders worth of springy lifters that can fail, get stuck closed because you've went a little bit too far in oil changes. You have to worry about it on every cylinder because this has something called dynamic fuel management, which means it has 8 cylinders that can turn on and turn off. But is that better or worse? So today we're going to tear this engine all the way down because it's kind of bad, and we're going to find out what went wrong. The L84, much like its predecessor, the L83, and its weird stepbrother, the L82, is an all-aluminum pushrod 5.3 liter V8 that produces 355 horsepower, which is relatively on par for its displacement and application. Nothing crazy here. But this particular engine is out of a 19 Silverado AT4 with 107,452 miles on it. I know you guys love those details, and the reason I know those details is I know what truck this engine is out of. So it's not supposed to be a bad engine. My buddy Evan bought a 2019 Silverado 1500 from the auction because he runs a yard that I work closely with here in town so that he could sell the drivetrain from it because it was rolled over semi-hard. It was wrecked pretty bad. And when you buy wrecked vehicles, sometimes the engine gets broken, the transmission gets broken, it breaks a bolt boss, it shatters an oil pan, or breaks a cylinder head. It happens to me, it happens to the best of us. But that's not the case with this engine. He hit me up and told me, hey, I bought this 19 Silverado, and the engine is junk, and we didn't know that until we dismantled it. So if you want it for your channel, it's available. I might have said yes a few too many times to that question, but regardless, this one's getting torn down today, and I'll show you why it is, in fact, junk. Well, because it says it on the intake, actually. It has a slight, here, let me put some light on it here. It's slightly deformed in the block area right here. It's starting to hatch. So, it's bad. Now, how did it wreck if the engine looked like that? Or did that cause the wreck? That's what we're going to find out today. When this engine came in, it still had a flex plate on it, and the torque converter was unbolted, which tells me this engine might actually turn over, which is what we're going to find out first. Maybe... You know, the bar's just not big enough. That's got to be what it is. This is probably going to hurt me. Nope, this one doesn't turn over. Not at all. The next thing I want to do is pull the plugs. Actually, let's pull the coil covers. And now we can pull the plug wires and then the plugs. That did not work the way I wanted it to. Onto the other side. There's stuff in the way. I don't think these have ever been off. Oh, it's draining oil out of a cylinder. That's not right. I'm going to rotate this over and drain the cylinder of oil. That's a bad thing. See, look, more oil's coming out. Yeah, oil's not supposed to come out of that part. Is that a frowny face? Kind of looks like it's unhappy. What do you guys think? Are these original? So this is the driver's side bank or left bank. This is the right bank. No, excuse me. Yes, I'm right. This is the front of the engine. I had the plugs reversed, but for this argument, it doesn't really matter. That's the front of the engine, that's the back of the engine. And these two are really oily. In fact, when I pulled this spark plug out, oil ran out. Do you think these have been done before? Are these original? 107,000 miles, GM Techs, what do you think? The plug wires were quite a fight. The next thing to do is to pull the intake, but I have to remove this crankcase ventilation line. Oh, I see. It's very easy. Now we can unbolt the intake. I think that's it. Do I even need Blue for this, or can he stay sleeping? So this is where all the DFM stuff exists, I think. So this is what the valley cover looks like when it doesn't have active fuel management, and instead it has dynamic fuel management. You see how it's smooth? You've got your GDI injectors here. Here's the connector for all the solenoids under the valley. There's your high pressure fuel pump. It's pretty simple in here. Let's take a look down these intake ports. Golly, 107,000 miles? What were they burning in this thing? Whoa, that's not right. That's oil, that doesn't go there. And that's even more oil. This is on the left-hand bank. Here's the right bank. Ooh, smooth as glass. Not very good looking, none of it. Now it's time to remove the exhaust manifolds, and I wanted you guys to pay attention to the little slits they put here. Now they did that for heat contractions, temperature contractions, and expansions. That's what usually breaks the heads off on these bolts. It's not their tightness, it's not flexing, it's well, it's kind of flexing. This contracts and expands at a different rate than the aluminum, and it can break the bolts off. But they totally alleviated that by making those little slits in there. It's not a problem anymore. Thank God they've found a solution for this. Let's get this manifold off. The final bolt. It's not supposed to be the final bolt. Let's take a look at the exhaust ports. That looks normal. That looks normal. Sorry, the end of this flashlight has perished. That looks normal. That all looks pretty good. Let's get the left-hand exhaust manifold removed. And this side looks pretty normal too. See nothing jumping out at me. Now it's time to peel valve covers off. I can do that with the coils in place. It's kind of nice. Nope. Well, this is a problem. Uh-oh. That one's a little loose. Maybe that's normal. Just not used to them having that amount of play. I think that's pretty normal when you're not on the lobe with the cam. So overall, it doesn't look too bad. There's a couple broken pieces of plastic in there, and that's probably from the oil cap, which is broken, likely happened in the accident. I don't really see anything too terrible in here. There's a piece of glass, probably from the oil cap being broken. Looks okay from this vantage point. Let's go to the other side. And the other side is very similar. I don't see any real glaring problems. From looking at this, you'd never know that the block was damaged. Speaking of block damage, there's a better look. Right underneath the motor mount bracket. Be hard to see until you start taking it apart. Oh, looks like the pan's damaged too. Shucks. Now it's time to remove the water pump. And normally, I make some giant joke about a used water pump and saving a used water pump. But I have been asked by one of my managers to save the used water pump. He wants it, he says. So I'm not going to be hurling this one across the shop. Now, unlike its predecessor, which had a goofy offset water pump that was over here on this gigantic housing. They went back to a center mount, and apparently the blocks are very similar between the L83 and L84, and you can use this water pump on an L83, which is why I think he wants it. So we are going to get this unbolted. Looks like there's a connector in here that I better disconnect before I get to that point. All right, it's loose. And it's off. Next, I'm going to remove the high pressure fuel lines, anything that would connect one head to the other so I can pull the heads. Now when I pull the heads, I'll be leaving the injectors in place. It's just a lot easier to pull those out when the heads are off. Now I have to unbolt the dipstick tube. I guess it's time. What? You know, it's probably because the engine's broke right next to it, but I mean, that's like cheating. Now it's time to crack the rockers loose. Oh, it's like that. Now we can pull the push rods out. Ooh, that one's got some marks on it. So does that one. Hard to tell if any of these are bent, but we will check. I think the mark I'm seeing is just from their situation. Well, it looks like the push rods are all straight. None of them are bent. And all the rocker arms look excellent. I don't see any excess wear in the cups or the pads. They look great. Now it's time to crack the head bolts loose on the passenger side or the right-hand bank. Ooh, that one's harder. All right, let's see what's behind head number one. Oh, oil. There's oil running out. That's not right. That's not right at all. Well, at first glance, the bores don't look too bad. Front cylinder. It's really not bad. Looks pretty good. But this is concerning. It's not at the same angle. In fact, I kind of feel like I could just... I can't. Maybe it's fine. It's not fine. You can definitely tell it's kind of a... And then its neighbor. It looks all right. Bores look good. Oh, this looks pretty good, except for that. That looks real bad. Well, there's only one way to know whether this is good or not, and that is with science. That one's good. I don't think that one's any good. So that one's got a disconnecting rod. The rest of these are pretty decent. Even though there were marks on the broken rod cylinder on the top of the piston, I don't really see any marks in the combustion chambers. This head looks really nice. I don't see any signs that I'm going to have to throw this in the scrap bin. I have no idea what the value of these heads are, but if it's anything like their predecessors, they're not worth a whole lot. The 5.3 heads just don't seem to have the value that the larger displacement engines do, but I'm not going to toss a good part, and they might be slightly different. Time will tell. Before we start on the other head, I have a few little doodly things to take care of. Perfect. Now we can crack the rockers off the other side. These are a little dirty on this side, but that has to do with crankcase ventilation. So the push rods are all straight. They all look good. Just like the other head, I don't suspect any oiling issues here. All the rockers look very nice. Now on these cylinder heads, the front head bolt on the driver's side is a giant cap screw. Hex head, Allen. It's one of those things, but it's really deep, so there's not really a big chance of stripping it out. But we have to get that out first. And they likely did that because of the shape of the casting of the cylinder head to keep from having to have two different cylinder head castings. And actually, I don't know if these heads can be flipped or not. I'm sure someone will answer that in the comments. It could be, too, that this bolt is threaded shallower or deeper into the head or into the block. I'm not quite sure why there's a different bolt here, but I'm sure someone knows in the comments. And it's very tight compared to the others. Yeah, that's much shorter. It's that one again. Okay, what is behind head number 2? It's not leaking oil. But there's definitely oil in there. So, I know I've talked about how you cannot compress a liquid. You're not supposed to find this much oil in a cylinder, and I don't think that happened from a mechanical failure. I think it created a mechanical failure because the rest of this looks pretty dang good. I don't see any issues outside of way too much oil in the cylinder. Because fundamentally our science is rooted in facts, I need to rotate this engine over and drain the oil from the cylinders so that our science is consistent. I think that gets most of it out. Okay, where were we? Ah, yes, science. Perfect. Just like the other bank, the cylinder head looks great. Everything's nice and consistent. I don't see any signs of trouble. Next, we're going to remove the high pressure fuel pump. See, does this come out easy? No, I think that just stays in there. Now it's time to tackle the valley cover. And I got to figure out this connector, which, what do I do here? It looks like it rotates, but then it would hit this. I can't really figure this out. Oh, I think I see it. Did that do it? That wasn't it. All right, there's got to be a way that doesn't involve some weird type of magic. Does this? Oh, I see. And then this slides. Look at that. Now what? It's different now, but I don't know what to do. Okay, it rotates. Wow, that's fancy. First time peeling off the valley cover on a dynamic fuel management engine. I don't want to go too crazy because I don't know how this comes apart. Looks like this connector needs to come up or go down. I don't know. I feel like I need to push this into the valley cover. Sometimes force is the answer. Well, it's kind of like a Hemi. So here is what the dynamic fuel management system looks like. This is the first time I'm seeing this in the flesh. Of course, I've seen videos and pictures, but it's not the same. Sorry, guys, it's just not. It's very similar to the Chrysler MDS in the Hemi, at least by appearance. Let's see how it comes apart. Got one more, I think. So hoping to keep this whole system together. So I'm going to gently try to pop these out. I have no idea how this is going to work. That's not too bad. I got one out. Yeah, the O-rings hold them in, but it's not like they can corrode in place with all the oil that they're bathed in. Look at that. Not much to it. So here are the DFM, sounds weird to say that, solenoids. And they basically control oil flow to whether the cylinder is going to be engaged or disengaged or deactivated. It's probably a better word to use there. I don't see any chunks of metal or anything crazy. There's no damage. It's just pretty interesting to look at. And the homes that they reside in, see the camshaft. Pretty neat. Now, I don't know if this is going to be more or less reliable because these are still pretty new. I mean, the oldest ones now are, what, 5 or 6 years old? Granted, we've seen plenty of failures with the AFM system by this point, but I don't see a lot of super late model GM stuff. So you techs that work at dealers and shops that see this late model stuff, is this a better system? Let me know in the comments because this is the first one of these I've had in the shop. Now it's time to pull the lifters out. They come out nice like all at once. Oh, that's beautiful. So we got all the lifters out of their trays. None of them are collapsed. All the rollers seem to feel pretty good, but there are some signs that things are going to be unhappy with time. A couple of these rollers have some damage. None of them feel bad. I don't think they were making any noise, but all it takes is for one of these to turn sideways in one of these trays, which happens, or one to collapse, or a needle bearing to fail. There's multiple failure points on these lifters. We'll see how they are with time. Now the crank pulley. I think maybe I tightened it too much standing on it. Let's get the big impact. If this doesn't do it, it should have. That did it. Well, my puller does not fit the crank pulley at all. It does not fit. So I'm going to call it a night. And, well, it's not really night yet. But I'm going to come back with something else to get this harmonic balancer off. So I did the right thing, and I modified the tool, like any scholar would. I shouldn't say modified, it's re-engineered. Yeah, I'm a good re-engineer. And now we can remove the front timing cover. Is that it? No bolt, no more bolts? Oh, there's a bolt here. And they give you this nice place to just give it a couple taps. There we are. There's the inside of the timing cover. Everything looks hunky-dory so far. Because of the position of the engine and where the cam is, which I don't believe the cam is locked up. It could be something against it. I'm going to unbolt the oil pump and see if I get a little play here. There's still a pickup thing on the oil pan itself, and I'm not sure. I don't believe I can get this off with the pan in place. I just don't think that works that way. But I think I can get it to move around a little bit, hopefully enough to be able to get the chain off the back of the cam, or off the cam gear, and pull the cam out. We're just going to try this. Blue. That do anything for me? I don't think it did. That did nothing. No, we're just going to unbolt the cam gear and see how much slack we get. It's because of this trigger wheel. I don't know if I can do this. I don't want to hurt the chain, you know, that would be terrible. can also kind of bend that tab. Look at that. See, look how much more room there is. Like, a used VVT Cam gear out of one of these engines is never something that I would feel good about selling. I think that'll do it. That'll help. I thought this was going to work. All right, I think I might have to concede. Or use my grandpa's old chain maulers here. Haven't used this in a little bit. I don't know if it fits. It doesn't really fit in here. Shocking, I know. Wait, maybe. I know, I can't believe I'm breaking the chain. All this to avoid taking off the oil pan. That was crunchy. I think I got it. Yeah. I don't care about the chain. It's too short anyway. Yeah, that wasn't going to do the trick. All right, now the cam plate. Before we slide the cam out, I need to remove, this is the driver for the high pressure fuel pump. There's the roller. Now the cam should just right out, if it doesn't have anything in the way. Oh, it'll come right out. Did I speak too soon? So the cam looks like it came out of this unscathed. I don't see any damage. The lobes all look pretty nice. It's definitely some normal wear for 100,000 miles. But it looks good. Of course, there's the lobe that drives high pressure fuel pump. Because I know this engine is partially exploded, I don't want to drop a bunch of engine confetti inside the engine by rotating it over. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbolt the pan and drop it in its current position. So that way we can retain the components that are left behind. I think we got them all over here. Oh, there's one over in the back. Excuse me. Look, Ma, no bolts. Let's just give it a little tug here. I think I got all the bolts out. Oh, it's starting to separate already. It's out. Not the way I wanted it, but it's out. I dropped the oil pan in the oil pan. Well, it seems that the windage tray took a few impacts. There's one right there, one there, and then clearly it hit the edge of the oil pan and broke the pan. Let's get this little baffle windage tray out of the way. Have any goo in here? Anything? Well, there's really not. Okay, there's some stuff in here that shouldn't be in here. I don't know what this is. It looks like some sort of pin. I don't see any fragments, though. That's weird. Let's just knock the pickup out of here. Since this pan is scrap, it'll have to get broken down anyway. That's not the tool for the job. I don't think this is either, but... Alright, well now we can take a better look at what's going on in here. So the inside of this pan is quite a lot of sludge for 100,000 miles, and it doesn't look great. I don't see a bunch of, there's some silvery stuff in there, but it's kind of like watery looking, and that could be maybe how it was stored at the end. I don't know. Pickup screen looks nice and clean. The pickup tube itself, and looks, it's on this side actually. It sustained an impact, but it's just a graze, just a flesh wound. Pan is junk. Interesting. I expected to find a whole bunch of pieces in here. Instead, there's just a couple little, looks like plastic. I don't see anything else. Now we can slide the oil pump off. Now this is what I think is the biggest improvement over its predecessor, is the oil pump, because on the L83, they have a variable oil pump, and they're kind of a pain to install. They gotta be lined up just right, and nobody really likes the idea of that. However, they went back to a traditional oil pump for the L84. Let's see what the inside of this thing looks like. Oh, cool. So it's still a vane style pump. Looks just like a transmission pump. This is really dry feeling. I'll pull this apart. So we can take a look to see what it looks like. I don't even have to clean it. This is really clean in here. So not really a ton of wear. I mean, we didn't think this was going to be a major oiling failure type of situation anyway, just judging by how the rest of this teardown has gone. This all looks really nice. All right, now I'm going to rotate the engine over for the reveal of how actually bad it is. Hopefully it doesn't rain a bunch of parts. It may. Nope, it rains coolant. Is it bad? I can't tell. Oh, it's not good. So this is all really just normal LS stuff in here. I mean, I know it's an LT, but this part of the design really hasn't changed much. And you can definitely tell where the damage is. That rod is, well, it's through the block. It punched a hole, or a couple of them. Yeah, that doesn't go there. You're not supposed to do that. It's hard to tell if any of the other rods were affected. It looks like it might just be confined to the one, and that would be it, which would be astonishing. But that's all it takes, is one. So now the plan is to unbolt the rods and pistons, and we'll drive them out. And I think I can get, thankfully this failed in this location, and I'm pretty sure I can get those off, get the cap off, and turn the crank away from that. I do fear that there's some other stuff hanging around in the way. We'll handle that as we need to. Let's crack these loose. Okay, time to fess up. Who did it? Who sent me this? One of you guys sent me this stock. It's some type of plastic bar that I can't pronounce. And somebody also sent me a bunch of small nylon drift punches. Stuff that I don't have, and now I do, that I can use on the channel. You guys are the best. The best. I don't expect anything. I can buy my own tools. I'm happy to do so. But sometimes when stuff shows up on my desk, I'm just blown away, just like this. So thank you. Some time to use it. Okay, let's see how this works. I think I'll get as far as I can by pushing it. Watch this just fall. Nope, I think I reached my... Nope, that's it. So it's time to use the tool. Boy, that works good. There's rod number 1, and now rod number 2. If the crank was in a slightly different position, this would be a little easier. There's a lot of carbon at the top of the crown. You know, if I just kind of do this, though, this might help me. That worked good. Now for rods 3 and 3.5. Let's get this unbolted and see if we can rotate the crank away from what's left of this rod. Okay, so in my theory, in my head, should be able to rotate the crankshaft away from that, and it should turn just fine, I think. Well, actually, we're going to push the remnants that I pushed down out of the way. because that will impede. Okay, that's out of the way. This crank should turn nice and freely. I'm gonna get this bolt tight first. That did not work. Let's hit it with the impact and see what happens. That's pretty tight, I think. We'll use the bar and see if we can turn this thing over. There's other ways that we can try to rotate this engine. It would just be really cool if that didn't happen. All right, let's try some things. All right, so we have blue. Blue might help us out here. Ooh, that sounded crunchy, but it moved. Ooh, it sounds really crunchy. Try this a little bit more. I've definitely moved it into a position now where, oh, I can get this one out, and I think we can get this thing apart. That is not, that's part of the block now. I can get the piston or the bearing out of it. All right, bearing's out. Let's unbolt its neighbor. I'll get that later. All right, let's see if we can get this thing to turn over some more. Oh, that's not going to do it. Nope, we're going to have to do this the way I don't want to. Don't want to do this at all, but I'm going to do it. Will this work? It worked a little bit. Barely enough to consider that working. You never really want to do this to the reluctor, but I'm not going to really try to sell this crankshaft because of everything it's been through. It's had a rough life. All right, now I can get the next two cylinders loose. The old knee stopper. Okay, we just need to turn a little bit, like so. Final rod. Now I need to get that rear cover out of the way. To do that, I got to unbolt one leg of the engine stand. We've done two legs before and it was fine, so one is just going to be great, especially if you don't look at it once I get the right size. Didn't even flinch. I don't know how much that's going to help me. It may be where the rear cover comes out with the crank. It may also be where I have to unbolt the other side. Let's just unbolt the other side. It's fine. Don't look at it. It's time to unbolt the main caps. I seem to have some trouble with this one. And that one. What can we do about that? I don't really want to hurt the block. So I'll hurt the socket instead. I don't care. Yeah, it's fine. Wow. There's my impact My air pressure low? What's happening here? No, it's good. I guess I'll just do this the old-fashioned way. They are pretty tight. Might be time for a new impact. Don't send me one. I'll get my own. Unless, of course, you make them. It's not even the thrust one, but it's because of the slight block deformation. This is the... Okay. That's kind of pinched in there. It'll probably maybe come out now. And now probably sort of the crankshaft should come out. Or not. This rear cover is it's being a problem. There's 1.5 bolts now holding the block to the stand. It's just as fine as it was before.
Oh, come on.
Rear cover. Okay. That should do it. Jerk. We have one remnant to remove. Well, one that we know we can remove. It's a stubby. Let's take a look at the rod bearings. They look good, but there's some signs of trouble, and I would bet that this was likely from its final moments. Nothing's coming apart too terrible, but there are signs that they're not perfect. And the rods and pistons, well, most of the rods look pretty good. Those little bitty oil rings, they're like 50%, maybe 30% clogged up. Pistons all appear to be in pretty good shape. Minimal skirt wear there. A little bit on the coating. A little bit more on that one. Now these are unlike the Gen 3 and Gen 4. There are left and right pistons. I know. I didn't make it. It's not my fault. I didn't do this. And then this one, well, we'll get back to the rest of this, but look at how this is completely twisted and bent. It's a fractured rod if I ever saw one. And there's the end of it. It looks like it had a few hits in there. Let's see if I can get a very good close-up of that. There we are. It's pretty cool. Now, surprisingly, that's the only destroyed rod. I mean, these could be slightly bent, but I don't see it. Usually they're pretty easy to tell when these rods are bent. And I'm just not seeing any signs of any of the other rods being bent. I don't know that they bend very far before breaking, which is likely what happened here. There's a little bit of skirt wear. You know what I think I'm going to do? I think tomorrow, well, it'll be the same moment in the video, but I'm going to run the rods and pistons through the wash. See how clean they get. See what they look like. Even the stubby here will go through the wash. There's lots of carbon in the land of the rings. It's a DI motor for you. Main bearings all look pretty good with some slight wear on the coating on the front couple shells. It's not bad. Really not bad. And even though this crankshaft looks good, I mean, it looks fine. There's really minimal damage. I don't really think that the crank itself made contact more than maybe once with the bottom of a piston. There's still some gouges, scratches in this. Probably would polish out, but it doesn't matter because that kind of force can bend a crankshaft. Even if it's just a few thousandths, it's going to cause problems. And it's my experience that these 5.3 cranks, when they're good, it doesn't matter if it's a Gen 3, 4, 5, or one of these, they're worth like $100 to $150 used. They're so plentiful, it doesn't make any sense to try to fix this. If this was a $1,000 crankshaft, absolutely. So this one will likely end up in the bin. And the block, well, there's the rest of our rod. It is incredibly impaled. And I could remove, well, I could try to remove this. There's no guarantees that I'll be able to get this out. But I kind of have an idea here that I think would be pretty cool to do if I can somehow pull it off. The rest of this looks really good. I don't see any major cause of concern. It's just this damage right here. So what I think I'm going to do, and I don't know if it'll make it into this video or not, I'm going to try to cut the block out around that. It seems ridiculous and it may not work. It may fall apart. And that's just a risk I'm willing to take because the block is, well, clean cast is what, 60 cents a pound right now. And I would need to get the rod out of there to get that $1. So I might as well just cut it out, scrap the rest of the block, and then I'd have a cool souvenir. Now, I don't know if I want to get rid of it. I might want to keep that one on the desk because it's not often that I have a rod impaled in a block that is stuck like this. Okay, rods and pistons are out of the parts washer. As you can see, they're nice and shiny. I tried my best to keep them in order, but we get a better look at their overall condition. And they're really not too bad. I mean, for 100,000 miles, I've definitely seen Gen 3 and Gen 4 look a lot better and worse. So I think these two are swapped. I think this is the one because if you notice, it's got a little nick right there. Little nickelist right on the side of the rod. This one, we'll get to that in a second. It really didn't do any damage to the piston. It's amazing. Speaking of pistons, pretty wild for factory. These are fairly high compression, being direct injection. They all came out pretty decent. Just the coating, a little bit of vertical wear on a couple of them. So here's the block. You can see a little better without pistons in there that there's some, I'll get to why there's some aluminum in there when we get to the other side. A little bit of wear. That looks actually like a water stain, but there's still some vertical scratches in there. That one's got some pretty deep vertical scratches. Let's go to the other side. So this is my rough attempt at trying to make some cool piece for my desk. And when I say it's rough, it's rough. We're experimenting here. I don't really have a lot of hope that this is going to end well. This is the bore in question, of course. Lots of pot here. Let's just roll this thing over so we can see. So you can see there's the rod hanging out. So I've done all this with a Sawzall so far. I've got about 10 minutes invested. And I'm not going to say it was a total waste, but it's hard to cut an engine in half with a Sawzall. I'm not saying it's impossible because it's clear that I'm making some headway. I just don't know how I want to do this. And I guess I'm looking for some opinions here because I would ideally like to save the entire bore and make something with the remnant of the rod and piston. I've cut through the journal here. I know I ruined it. So what I think I'm going to do is try to cut down here through part of the cam journal, that little sliver down there, and then from the top, if I cut through the top in the valley through the cam journal, I'll have a slice of this. But this is what this looks like. Let me know how dumb you think I am for doing this. It's just Sawzall blades. It's clear what happened with this engine. It tried to compress oil. And it doesn't matter what type of fluid you try to compress, whether it's oil, whether it's antifreeze, whether it's coolant, whether it's ethylene glycol, if it's water, if it's too much fuel, the engine is always going to lose. always. Now, sometimes you get lucky and you think about what you're doing, and before you go to turn the key, you pull the plugs out and you crank it without the possibility of compression, and it can push all of the liquid out. You can take the intake off and drain all the oil out of it to ensure that you're not going to blow up an engine. However, none of those things happen at the auction. They do not pull spark plugs. They do not check the oil level typically. They don't pull the intake. They don't pull the air box apart. They put a jump box on it and turn the key. Now, I'm not actually wholeheartedly thinking that the auction is what blew this engine up, because normally when an engine is trying to start and it hydrolocks from some fluid in the cylinder, it will sometimes just stop the engine from turning and no damage is done. In other cases, it'll fire 1 or 2 cylinders before it locks the engine up, and in that case, it usually bends a rod, maybe 2. But in this case, that's not what happened. This was running when oil entered the combustion chamber. So a couple things could have happened here. Number one is that the tumble this truck went through, the multiple rollover, I have no idea what this truck went through, but it was really bad. This truck was tore up real hard. It could have turned upside down while it was running, and oil could have somehow made it, enough oil made it into a combustion chamber while it was running to blow itself up. That could have happened. Another possibility is that a tow truck driver or the previous owner tried to see if it would start, or the auction tried to see if it would start. What could have really happened is that this thing could have sat right side up, the oil would have drained out of the cylinders, but it doesn't drain out of the intake. And then you start it up, and the vacuum created in the intake manifold will usually push fluid somewhere else into a cylinder. That's what I think happened. I think it was running. I don't think it was necessarily at a super high RPM, because it would have destroyed the bearing from the rod that beat itself to death, and it really wasn't too torn up. And it's a shame, because this engine looked like it was in pretty good shape, and they're $3,000 or $4,000. And this is the risk when you buy from the auction. A lot of times they'll advertise cars that run and drive. There are some people that also have YouTube channels that have bought run and drive to find out that their car has a broken engine and transmission, and it never ran. It's usually a keystroke. It's a data entry error. We've all gone through that. I don't really think it's always nefarious like a lot of people like to believe. However, there's no recourse. So you buy it, it leaves their lot, and they wash their hands of it. And that's the risk when buying salvage pieces from the auction, from cars from any auction, especially ones like Copart or IA, where, at least in Copart's case, I think they charge you $10 to go look at 3 cars, and if you want to look at more than that, then you have to come back or pay another $10 or something like that. I don't even preview anything anymore, because I just bid less. I think that's just the general rule that most people take. Either way, it's really unfortunate, because we've all gotten bit by bad buys. I've definitely had my fair share of them. The idea is that you average good buys. So speaking of good buys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I've got lots of parts to sell out of this thing. The heads are good. The top end of this engine is pretty decent. The bottom end is pretty indecent. It's indecent. And if you'd like to buy parts out of anything else I've torn down, or if you want to check out our latest inventory, you can go to Importapart.com. I've been updating our parts cars every single week. We've got a lot of cool stuff in, some borderline exotics coming in the door in the next month or so. So keep an eye on that. And if you don't see what you're looking for on our website, you can always shoot us an email. I'll leave that in the video description. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.